Oh, I see. Missing. Oh, it's Peter, right?
Yeah, I think we're ready to go.
Okay. Okay. Let me share the screen first. Last week, we were, or fortnight ago, we were talking about the movement in India. So we will continue to talk about Buddhist movement in India. But before that, before the class, I would like to share with you some information on this Bodhisattva path. This is in reference to the assignment 1, where I think I need to further clarify so that this concept of Bodhisattva is better understood, and then our understanding of humanistic Buddhism will also be better. So, first of all, Bodhisattva is actually the name that we use, or the name used by the Buddha before his enlightenment and all his previous life. So, you notice that many parts of the sutta, whenever the Buddha was referred to before his enlightenment, before he's 35 years old, he was always referred to as the Bodhisattva. The word Bodhi means enlightenment, Sattva means essence. So the essence of enlightenment. Or nowadays we say Bodhisattva is a being who is who has vowed to attain enlightenment. So that's the meaning of Bodhisattva. And the Buddha himself was said to have vowed to become a Buddha many aeons of life before. That's why this word Bodhisattva was initially used for the Buddha before his enlightenment, and of course all his previous life. Then later on, we used to describe any person who vowed to attain Buddhahood by perfection of the parami. Now this is especially so in Mahayana Buddhism, whereby in Mahayana Buddhism it is said that if we already make a vow that we want to attain full enlightenment, Samma Sambuddhahood, then you are called a Bodhisattva. And you must, to do so, you must perfect the 6 paramis in the Mahayana. The 6 actually is the same as the 10 perfections in the Theravada Buddhism. But nowadays, we also call anybody who aspires to attain enlightenment a Bodhisattva. It's like an honorific, you know. If I call Dennis, you are a Bodhisattva. We call you Bodhisattva Dennis or Bodhisattva Corey. It's an honorific. We are not very sure whether you vow to attain enlightenment or Buddhahood, but we would like to call you such. This is very common, especially in the Mahayana circles, where people like to honor the other party by calling him a Bodhisattva. Now, in Mahayana, there is another concept of Bodhisattva. This concept of Bodhisattva is not found in Theravada Buddhism. In Mahayana, a Bodhisattva is a being who, having brought himself to the brink of Nibbana, voluntarily delays the acquisition of his prize so that he may return to the world to make it accessible to others. He deliberately chooses to postpone his release from samsara in order to show the path for others to attain Nibbana. Now, this is like in Theravada, we will say that these are very heroic actions. Even though you can attain Nibbana, you refuse to attain Nibbana, but you would like to remain in this world to continue to save other beings until all other beings are safe. So this is a great concept in Mahayana Buddhism. So, okay, next. I want to compare this with Theravada Buddhism now. In Theravada, the word Bodhi is used to refer to the qualities of the Buddha or Pacceka Buddha and Arhat in expressions such as Samma Sambodhi, Pacceka Bodhi, and Savaka Bodhi. So, you will notice that in the Theravada Buddhism, we say if the Buddha attained the present Buddha, Gautama Buddha, attained the highest enlightenment, we say he attained the Samma Sambodhi. Samma here sometimes translated as right, sometimes translated as fully enlightened. So we say Gautama Buddha is a Samma Sambuddha. Okay, he attained Samma Sambodhi. Then in Theravada Buddhism also we recognize that there is another category, another Buddha, we call him Pacceka Buddha. Pacceka Buddha also attained Buddhahood by his own effort. But he does not preach. That's why we call him Pacceka or silent Buddha, meaning to say he does not share or preach the Dhamma to others. So we call him Pacceka Buddha, who has attained Pacceka Bodhi. Then we have another category, the Savaka Bodhi. Savaka, as I have explained earlier, the word Savaka means listener. But in today's concept, it simply means disciple. Because those days, a disciple listens. Learn through listening, or a learner. So Savaka Bodhi means all those who practice under a Samma Sambuddha, like, Ananda, Sariputta, Mongkalana, Asaji, all those who have practiced under the Samma Sambodhi, under Samma Sambuddha, Gautama Samma Sambuddha, they also attain a stage of enlightenment. We call it Savaka Bodhi. So this Savaka Bodhi attainment, we call them Arahants. Okay. So these three concepts are found in Theravada Buddhism. But in Mahayana, you have the 5 vehicles: Pusayana, Devayana, Savakayana, Pacceka Buddhayana, and Bodhisattvayana. So for convenience sake, I tabled this up so that you can have a better understanding. Just now I explained to you Theravada. In Theravada Buddhism, you have the highest one, fully enlightened Buddha, Samma Sambuddha, a being who attained enlightenment through his own effort and preached to others. That's Samma Sambuddha. Pacceka Buddha, the silent Buddha, a being who attained enlightenment through his own effort also, but does not preach to other people. Okay? And then you have the Samma Savaka Bodhi and Arhat, a being who learned from Samma Sambuddha, who is a disciple of Sambuddha, but he also attained enlightenment. So we call them Arhanta Buddhas. So in Theravada Buddhism, all these 3 categories are considered enlightened beings. Okay. Venerable Dr. Wapolo Rahula used to stress that Arhantas are also Buddhas. Okay. Meaning to say, during the time of the Buddha, when the Buddha moved around with 60 Arhants, for example, those 60 Arhants were considered as Buddhas. But because the Samma Sambuddha was still around, so they will have another title called Arhanta. It's like in the university, you earn your PhD under a professor. That professor also has a PhD, and so having earned your PhD, you are considered a doctor, and your professor, although you address him as a professor, he is also a doctor. Okay, So this is the concept you find in the Theravada Buddhism. And this is the concept we find in Mahayana Buddhism. So this Savakayana is the same as Savaka Bodhi. This Pachika Buddhayana is the same as Pachika Bodhi. This Bodhisattvayana is the same as Samma Sambuddhayana, Samma Sambodhi. Now, before the advent of Mahayana around the 1st century AD, this part you don't find the word yana. Whether it's Theravada or Mahayana, you don't find because those words did not appear at the time. The word Mahayana only first appeared in the Buddhist text around the 1st century AD. And with the advent of Mahayana, the term Mahayana, so you have all this concept of Bodhisattvayana, Pachikayana, and Savakayana appeared. Now, if you look at this tree, it's very much the same as this tree. So you can actually find that the concept of yana, of this yana in Mahayana, actually has got an embryo in the Theravada Buddhism, in the Orthodox Buddhism. Then these three paths are the path of liberation, the path that lead to the other worldly. Whereas the other two paths, Rusayana, human vehicle, Devayana, or the Deva vehicles, these two vehicles do not lead us to liberation, do not lead us to enlightenment. So, for example, if you just stay in Rusayana, in Theravada we say by observing the 5 precepts, then you will be like Confucianism. You only talk about this worry, not the other worry. Okay? So, but is there a similar teaching in Theravada? Yes. In Theravada, even though we don't have any specific label for this, but in Theravada, it is mentioned that if you observe the 5 precepts, you will be able to be reborn as human beings. So, Theravada Buddhism actually has an equivalent of Rusayana. And similarly, Devayana. And in fact, this Devayana and Rusayana are often put together. Okay? So in Theravada Buddhism, it is said that if you practice the 4 Brahma Vihara, Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekka, you will be in the heavenly plane. So you are on the Devayana. So now this comparison would make you understand now that Mahayana Buddhism at a later stage developed these 5 yanas, which actually you can find more or less a similar pattern in the Theravada Buddhism. So I just briefly repeat here. In Theravada, it is mentioned that observance of the 5 precepts ensure that one will not fall into the Wuku plane. So in Theravada, that is actually a Prusayana. And then one would be reborn in heavenly plane if one practices the 4 Brahma Vihara. So that is, if you practice the 4 Brahma Vihara, you will be in the heavenly plane after you die, and that means that you are also on the Devayana. Okay. Now, the main difference is in Mahayana, emphasis on Bodhisattvayana and consider the Pachika and Savakayana good only for self-liberation. So we go one backward. The main difference in Mahayana is that Mahayana, being Maha, big, great vehicle, always stress on this one, Bodhisattvayana, means you must go for full enlightenment. And consider these two, Savakayana and Pachika Buddhayana, as inferior or Hinayana, or today we respectfully call it Theravada path. These two is called by the great Mahayanis as the liberation vehicles, the liberation vehicles or the small vehicles. They consider these two as still not good enough, not ultimate enough. And that is the main difference. So when Tai Shi came, Tai Shi proposed Purusayana, we should not be talking about Devayana or Savakayana or Pachikayana. If you go back to the notes I gave you, Taishi said, if you are talking about Devayana, then you are talking about going to heaven, then you are talking about devas and gods and things like that. That is not a liberation path. And if you are talking about Savakayana and Pachikayana, then that is also only for self-liberation. It has very little concern with the world of helping other people. Therefore, he proposed that we should go from Purusayana, human being, and then progress to Bodhisattvayana. That is the main difference, the main advocacy of Tai Chi. Okay, so because some of you wrote that Tai Chi invented or Tai Chi proposed the five vehicles. The five vehicles were already there in Mahayana. Tai Chi did not invent the five vehicles. He emphasized on Purusayana and then progressed to Bodhisattvayana. His emphasis on Purusayana was an appeal to return to the humanistic nature of Buddhism. Okay, so I look at it. His emphasis on Purusayana was actually an appeal to return to the humanistic nature of Buddhism, because Purusa, means humans. So by going back to Purusayana means go back to the humanistic nature of Buddhism. He's talking about his worldly of Buddhism. And his linking of Purusayana to Bodhisattva, and then he proposed to link Purusayana from Purusayana and then progress to Bodhisattvayana. To me, this is in line with the fundamental doctrine of Mahayana. Because in Mahayana, you must always stress on Bodhisattva path. Okay? And you must also understand that actually this adds a spiritual dimension to Purusayana. Just imagine if he talked only about Purusayana without emphasizing on Bodhisattvayana, what will happen? It means that Buddhism becomes only a teaching of this world, teaching people about how to live in this world, but not teaching people about training of the mind, gaining enlightenment, and to progress spiritually. Therefore, to me, his linking of Purusayana to Bodhisattva path actually added a spiritual dimension to Purusayana. Okay, so this is my brief additional explanation on Bodhisattva. Hoping that you can get a better grasp of the concept by now. So, any questions before we go back to India?
I do have one question. So, if Theravada says that the Sravaka Bodhi is, Savaka Buddha is the same, or sort of equivalent to the Buddha, what does Mahayana say the difference is then? Are they saying that the Buddha was more enlightened than them, than the Savakayana? I forget how to say it. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, different school of thoughts, they have their own arguments. So Mahayana tend to say that they advocated the highest path. So anything below that, for example, Savakayana and Pachikapudayana are considered as small vehicle or inferior vehicles because they are still not ultimate. They do not help others. Okay, because like when you say Savakayana, means you listen to from your masters, then you get your own enlightenment, but you are not really helping other people. But Theravada would not agree with this. Like Venerable Dr. Wakula said, how could you gain an Arhanta Buddhahood if you are selfish? You also have to practice many other things that are taught. You also have to practice whatever that was taught by the Buddha. And those teachings, for example, dhyana, sila, bhavana, and so on, all those are requirements for you to be of service to others. So it cannot be selfish. So the allegations that Theravada is selfish is often refuted by Theravadas.
Thank you.
Now, when people reach a certain spiritual levels, then they tend to argue over this kind of academic subjects. For me, I have not attained any stage, so it doesn't matter whatever jhana. You just live the path, live the daily life according to the basics taught by the Buddha. There's no need to say that I aspire for this or that. Fundamentally, I must be doing what I'm supposed to do daily life in our daily life now. Okay, now if there's no further question, we will go. I will stop this share and we'll go back to India. Okay. Okay, let me share the screen now for India. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, right. So a fortnight ago, we were talking about Buddhist movement in India. And I began with early history, where we went through the time of the Buddha, and then the Asoka period. After the Asoka period is the Kushan period. After the Kushan period is the Gupta period. After the Gupta period, you have the Harsha, the King Harsha, during which time the Xuanzang came to India and met him. After Harsha, there was a period of chaos and things like that. And then eventually the demise of Buddhism. And we talk about the various causes for the demise of Buddhism, which officially we say ended around the year 1290, around that period, 13th century, okay? Then we talk about the destruction of Nalanda. Sorry, officially 1193, it was the 12th century. So this was some of the lessons we can learn. Then we started by talking about revival of Buddhism in India. The total Buddhist population in 2010 in the Indian subcontinent, excluding of Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bhutan, was about 10 million, of which 92.5% lives in India. Meaning to say, today we have around 9.2 million Buddhists in India. It's not a big figure considering that India now has a population of 120 million. And this revival has a lot to do with the conversion of the Dalits by Dr. Ambedkar, led by Dr. Ambedkar. And I mentioned to you the 4 castes in India at that time: the Brahmins caste, the Kshatriya, the Vaishyas, the Sudra, and then one that is out of the caste that is called the Dalits. Okay? So they were in fact 4 castes plus 1, they call it untouchables. It means out of the caste. Okay? And then how the Dalits were treated, I already shared with you the stories of Dr. Ambedkar, how he has to carry his own gali set to the school, to lay down on the stool so that he will not contaminate other people. Then at the end of the day, he has to carry that gali set back to his house. And in many ways, he could not find accommodations, could not even get a horse carriage to carry him and things like that. So we have to. So now the stories have already been told. You don't have to remember the stories. Stories are for us to enjoy. Okay. Now, Dr. Ambedkar in 1927. First, I'll let you know his date of birth, 1891. Okay. 9 years before the turn of the century, 1891. So by 1927, he was already 37 years old. He burned the Manusmriti. Now, this Manusmriti actually is a Hindu text that advocated the caste system, that say that human beings were born from Brahma, and so the highest caste come from the mouth, the second caste come from the hand, then the third caste come from the leg, and the fourth caste come below the leg and things like that. Okay, and then in 1931 he had a dialogue with Gandhi on a compromise or not to compromise. While he and Gandhi joined hands with many other people to champion for the independence of India, they were not in agreement in a number of issues. Dr. Ambedkar and Gandhi could not agree with a number of things. We will talk about that when we have the opportunity later. Okay. So in 1935, a conference of the oppressed class was called. They call it the Yala Congress. In the Yala Congress, he said, "Though I'm born a Hindu, I will not die a Hindu." So this is also the first time he declared himself living Buddhist Hinduism, 1935. And until his eventual conversion in 1956, there's about another 31 years, So this is what he declared in more detail. I mentioned here in more detail. What he declared in the Yala Conference in October 1935. The disabilities we have suffered and the indignities we had to put up with were the result of our being the members of the Hindu community. Will it not be better for us to leave that fold and embrace a new faith that would give us equal status, a secure position, and rightful treatment? I advise you to sever your connection with Hinduism and to embrace any other religion. He continued, but in doing so, be careful in choosing the new faith and see that equality in treatment, status, and opportunities will be guaranteed to you unreservedly. Unfortunately for me, I was born a Hindu, untouchable. It was beyond my power to prevent that. But I declare that it is within my power to refuse to live under ignoble and humiliating conditions. I solemnly assure you that I will not die a Hindu. So in that Yala Conference, he actually encouraged people to leave the Hindu religion, but he did not mention which religion to go for, the new religion. And he himself took more than 30 years to decide which new religion he was going to. And in fact, after his declaration, many religions were interested in him. Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Sikhism, or even Zainism, they all try to, get him into their fold. So it took him 30 years to study all these major religions before he made his final decision in 1956. But in 1946, he established the Siddhartha Humanistic and Science College. Now you notice that in 1946, that's 11 years after the Yellow Conference, he established a Humanistic and Science College. He used the name Siddhartha. That name reflects his inclination to Buddhism, but you must understand in 1946 he was still not a Buddhist. He was still not a Buddhist. But by using the name Siddhartha, I think his inclination was already shown. By 1950, May, he attended the World Fellowship of Buddhist Conference in Colombo. Still, at that time, he was still not a Buddhist. But I think all indications show that he was inclined to Buddhism, and the Buddhist world actually very much welcomed him. And I think the Buddhist world had given him a special position to come to this conference. And in fact, because of this, we also noticed that in the World Fellowship of Buddhists, in later stages, there was made a ruling that only Buddhists can attend this conference, because subsequently there were many others who were not Buddhists also attending the World Fellowship of Buddhist Conference. That sounds very ridiculous. So later stages, we in the World Fellowship of Buddhists make a decision that delegates to the conference must be Buddhists. Anyway, in 1951, he published a hymn book, Buddha Upasana Karta, and later that year started writing the Buddha and his Enlightenment. Well, he was a very busy man, writing so many things. You find that here is he's a very prolific writer in many fields: politics, laws, economics, religions, and so on. So he started writing the Buddha and his Dharma and completed only in 1986. That is just a few months before his passing away. Again, 1954, still he hasn't become a Buddhist, but again he attended the WFB conference in Rangoon. Okay, and 1956, he established the India Buddhist Congress. By that time, he was still not a Buddhist, but he has not officially declared himself a Buddhist, but all indications show that he was already coming to Buddhism. He established the Indian Buddhist Congress. And in the same year, 1956, he attended the World Fellowship of Buddhist Conference in Nepal and talked on Buddha or Karma. I think this book, Buddha or Karma, is about political economy. You can read it in the internet. So then came the grand days. On the 14th of October 1956, he officially converted to Buddhism together with a team of followers of about 350,000. Well, sometimes say 500,000, sometimes says 200,000, but I think a more moderate figure would be 350,000. And there were a lot of Theravada monks who were there to officiate the ceremony. So this was the grand function, one of the biggest in India. This was in a place right in the middle of India called Nagpur, Nagarjuna Pura, Nagarjuna Pura, in short Nagpur. And they built there is a big pagoda there. If you go there today, you can still see one big pagoda. They call it Dishabhumi. Then, at that conversion ceremony, he declared, "Today we leave hell." And then again, this is the more recent one. In 2007, Bombay, there was another about 200,000 people who converted to Buddhism en masse. Okay? And he mentions, before he converted to Buddhism, he mentioned, whatever system there are 4 criteria that you must follow. Whatever system you choose must be one that inspires the ultimate values of man and society. Whatever religion you choose must be one that is rational. And a religion that is acceptable must be one that can inspire liberty, equality, and love. And whatever religion or philosophy you choose must not be one that makes poverty sacred. So one should not praise poverty. We should eradicate poverty. So this was the four criteria he mentioned, and that's how, based on these four criteria, he eventually chose Buddhism. So in choosing a religion, he mentioned a few things. When he made his choice, he mentioned a few things why he chose Buddhism. So he mentioned that in choosing a religion, there are a few things to consider. Number one, not all religions are good. Now this is interesting. A lot of people like to say all religions are good, but if you scrutinize carefully, some religions actually inflicted much more suffering to humanity. Just like some political ideologies could inflict sufferings to humanity. And Baker was bold enough to state clearly that not all religions are good. And number two, religions must be relevant to our human life, not vain talks about God, spirit, heaven, and hell. Now this is interesting. This is equivalent to what Taishi has mentioned, right? Not to talk about just God or spirit or heaven or hell or ghosts and things like that. It must be relevant to our human life. And number three, he said to regard God as the center of religion is wrong. Okay? So this again showed his humanistic inclination. And number four, to regard salvation of the soul as the center of religion is also wrong. To regard human sacrifice as the center of religions is wrong. Okay? You know, sometimes when we want to justify humanity and suffering, we want to justify suffering amongst human beings, we tend to say, well, this is the will of God, or this is your sacrifice, this is a test of God. Baker said this is wrong. True religions exist in the human mind, not in the scriptures. This is a very bold and interesting advocacy. True religion exists in the human mind, not in the scriptures. Number seven, human beings and morality is the true center of religions. Otherwise, it's merely superstitious. Here again, he stressed on human beings and morality. Number eight, the purpose of religion is to rebuild this world, to make it a happy world. There's no need to talk about creation and end. Number nine, birth and wealth is not the standard to judge a person. This is where he comes to focus on the caste system. Okay? All things are inseparable from cause and effect. Now, this is bringing in Buddhism now to talk about cause and effect. So that was the reason, how he used. I mean, he chose religion. Then, but why did he? When he chose Buddhism, he has to do some homework, right? So, number one, he tried to prove that the untouchables were Buddhists. So sometimes people say he's also an anthropologist, although he's an accountant, an economist, a lawyer, but he's also an anthropologist because he wrote a book, The Untouchables, Who Were They and Why They Become Untouchable, published in 1948. Well, if you are interested, you can Google and maybe you can still find this book. In his teachings on the origin of untouchability, he makes it clear that today's untouchables were once Buddhists. In his argument, Dalits or the untouchables were Buddhists, but because they refused to convert back to Hinduism, so they were thrown out of the caste. Well, it sounds logical. That's why there is a caste called outcast, out of the caste, because they were, although considered as Hindus, but the Hindus consider them as out of Hinduism. That's called outcast or untouchables. And he chose Buddhism because Buddhism was an Indian religion and the Buddha was nearer to the untouchable masses. In many ways, the Buddha was very much more sympathetic, more open to the untouchable masses, nearer to them. The untouchables would be able to join the world Buddhist community and thus pave the way for world Buddhist brotherhood. So his main reasons, number one, that is world Buddhist. We were Buddhist. So that's why he did not use the word conversion to Buddhism. He said conversion back to Buddhism. Okay. And then number two, Buddhism was very much closer to the lower untouchable masses. And number three, by conversion back to Buddhism, the untouchable will join the world Buddhist community. So we become members of a world brotherhood. So these were the three main reasons why he eventually chose Buddhism. In fact, he has talked to leaders of the Sikh religion, the Hindu, the Sikh religion, the Muslim religion, the Christian religion, but he eventually opted for Buddhism. He added that Buddhism teaches social freedom, intellectual freedom, economic freedom, and political freedom. Equal not between men and men only, but between men and women also. The day before his conversion, he added that the greatest benefit he had conferred on country was by taken care that my conversion will not harm the tradition of the culture and the history of his land. Now, this is also actually another reason. If he were to convert to Christianity and Islam, these two religions are not considered the traditional culture of India. So I think that is also a reason why he selected Buddhism. And another reason is the Buddha was very close to the untouchable classes or to the lower classes. The Buddha fought against Chatuvarna. The caste system in India is called Chatuvarna. Varna, V-A-R-N-A, Varna means, in Bahasa Malaysia, Varna means color. People talk about color. Means that in this case, it's a caste. Okay. So the Buddha himself had admitted people like Upali, the barber, Sunita, the nut carrier, and many other lower caste people into the Sangha. So now I will tell you some stories just to make the monotony, to break the monotony of my lecture. All of us know that during the first Buddhist council, Mahakassapa chaired the meeting, and Ananda recited all the suttas that he heard from the Buddha, and that was how the sutta was compiled. And there was another great person by the name of Upali who recited all the Vinayas, and that was how the Vinayas was compiled. Now, Upali, this well-known Upali, was actually a barber. He belongs to the Sudra class, the fourth class. He was born into the Sudra class, and having no chance of education, he only could learn one trade, and that is to cut people's hair. His mother sent him to the palace to cut hair for the princess. So 3 years after the Buddha gained enlightenment, the Buddha returned to Kapilavatthu. When the Buddha returned to Kapilavatthu, people actually got hold of Upali to come over and cut the hair for the Buddha. So at first, Upali was a little bit shaken because he thinks that the Buddha was very high and enlightened. But after seeing the Buddha and persuaded by his mother, he eventually cut the hair for the Buddha. And after cutting the hair for the Buddha left. the Buddha left, and there were a few princesses, Ananda, Anuruddha, and a few who wanted to follow the Buddha to become his disciple. So they followed the Buddha to become the Buddha's disciple. But before they went off, Upali the barber also used to cut hair for all these princesses. So all the princesses said, why not we, since we are going to become monks, why not we give all our jewelries and our possessions to Upali? So they lay out a blanket and they put all their jewelries on the blanket and handed everything to Upali. So Upali suddenly was loaded with a lot of wealth, a lot of jewelries. But he was thinking, even the princesses were willing to give up all these things to follow the path of the Buddha. What is all these jewelries worth? This does not worth anything to me at all. So finally, he decided to just hang the jewelries on top of a tree branch and wanted to go to the Buddha. But as he walked halfway, he accepted him or not. So he sat by the roadside and cried. Then the Venerable Sariputta passed by, saw him, and after inquiry, Upali told him that actually I very much like to become the Buddha's disciple, but I'm afraid the Buddha would not me as I'm a sutra. Then the Sariputta said, you follow me. I think the went to see the Buddha. And the princesses were already there. So when the Upali saw the Buddha, and the Buddha straight away ordained him, while the other princesses were still undergoing meditation training, meaning to say the other princesses whom Upali used to cut their hair were still not monks, whereas Upali became monks earlier than them. Now the Buddha said he intentionally, purposely did that because after that he would tell the princesses, now you are no more princesses, you are no more subject, you are monk, and by our code of ethics, Upali is your senior, so you have to pay respect to Upali now. So imagine all these princesses now suddenly have to turn around and to Upali, their previous servant. That was how the Buddha dismantled the caste system. And even though the princesses were at first eventually knew that they had to do it to subdue their pride. Because if you still think that you are princesses, there's no way, and with so much attachment to your previous positions, to your name and fame and wealth, there will be no possibility of gaining enlightenment. So that was the story of Upali. And then you have another one, Sunita, the night soil carrier. Sunita was also born, Sunita here, was also born into the Sudra class. And his job was a scavenger or a night soil carrier. You know, in ancient India, or even until today, there are no flush system in the toilet. So whatever things that come out of a human body would eventually drop into buckets, and those buckets would have to be carried away by a scavenger, a kind of profession to carry all these things, all the night soil or the sheets to be thrown away outside the city. When I was young, I could still see this was the practice. So because he used to carry much soil, he was dirty and smelly and very ashamed of himself. So he would normally hide away from people. But one day, while doing his job, he heard a lot of noise and people were crowding around to offer food to the Buddha. So he came and had a peep. But while he was very keen to have a look at the Buddha, he was also very ashamed of himself. So eventually he just stood by the one side of the street, but suddenly he noticed the Buddha was coming on his way. So afraid to let the Buddha see him, he retreated to another corner. But again he found the Buddha follow him. Then again to another place, again he found the Buddha was right in front of him. So eventually he fell, and the night soil was covered his body, and he was dirty and smelly, and he was so ashamed of himself that he cried and he hoped that he would die at that time. But then he heard the Buddha say, "Sunita, come." So he was shocked. And then he asked, then, "Are you addressing me?" The Buddha said, "Yeah, I'm addressing you. Would you like to join the monkhood?" Then Sunita said, "How can I, such a dirty and smelly person, join the monkhood?" Then the Buddha says, just like the Ganges River, the Yamuna River, the Rohini rivers, when all the rivers came into the sea, they lost their name. So also, whoever came into the Sangha, once they enter into the Sangha, there is no more caste. There's no more previous life. There's no more previous labels to you. So the Buddha comforted him. The Buddha asked for some water, and together with Sariputta, washed him, and then gave him the bowl and admitted him into the Sangha. So Sunita joined us. Sunita practiced very diligently. Then 3 months passed. The news spread. Those days there were no and no Facebook. So 3 months, the news reached the king, King Pasenani, and also many other religious leaders. They were very furious that the Buddha had purposely did something to challenge them by admitting sutras into the Sangha. So the religious leaders, the Brahmins, complained to King Pasenani. He said, "Okay, I will need to speak to the Buddha. I can't imagine myself having to pay respect to see the Buddha." So while he entered while he came to the Buddha's monastery, outside the monastery, he saw that was already 3 months after the conversion. Then he saw a monk on top of a rock preaching to a group of monks and lay people. Then the King Pasenani asked the monk, "I would like to see the Buddha." But before that, since he saw this monk talking, so he listened. And he was very pleased and very happy to listen to this monk talking. So after listening to his talk, he told this monk, "I would like to see the Buddha." Then this monk showed him the way. So King Pasenani entered into the monastery and told the Buddha, "I came here to inquire one thing. Is it true that you have admitted the sutras into the order? But before that, let me ask you, who is that young monk out there preaching? I see him very radiant and very good in his Dhamma." Then the Buddha said, "That monk is Sunita." Then at once, King Pasenani felt ashamed of himself, you see. And so he did not continue with querying the Buddha, but accepted that Sunita to be admitted as a member of the Sangha. So from here, even the king have to accept that what was done by the Buddha. So this was the story of the conversion of to let us know that the Buddha himself actually went out of his way to dismantle the caste system, but in a very polite way. Then, in the conversion ceremony, on the in October 1956, he made all the new converts make these famous 22 vows. Okay, so just briefly go through the 22 vows. I shall have no faith in Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, nor shall I worship them. Because these are names of Hindu gods, and since they want to forego, they're going to make sure that they just vow they really need this one. I have no faith in Rama and Krishna. Okay? No faith in Gauri, Garbati, and other gods and goddesses of Hindu, nor shall I worship them. I do not believe in the incarnation of God. So the first four things, we always talking about God and the Hindu God that we vow to leave them. I do not believe that Lord Buddha was the incarnation of Vishnu. I believe this to be sheer madness and false propaganda. Then go on the next one. I shall not perform the sadhana, nor shall I give pindahan. Then now it comes to Buddhism. I shall not act in a manner violating the principles and teachings of the Buddha. I shall not allow families to perform. I shall endeavor to establish quality. Then now more detail about Buddhism. Now I shall follow the noble parameters prescribed by the Buddha. I shall have compassion and loving kindness for all living beings and protect them. I shall not steal, shall not lie, shall not commit carnal sins, shall not take intoxicants. All these are not steps. Noble Eightfold Path and practice action and development of humanity because it is based on it. I believe the Dharma of the Buddha is true.
We lost your connection there for a minute, so your screen's no longer sharing and you are muted.
Are you with me now? Can you see the
Yes.
screen?
No,
can see.
You need to share your screen again.
Oh, okay. Okay, are we back?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so there was a Scheduled Caste Federation conference in 1956 in Agra, and Dr. Ambedkar said the foundation of Hindu religion is based on Chaturvarna, the concept of inequality, injustice, discrimination, and exploitation. But the religion I'm going to give the depressed class is India's own Buddhism, which is based on universal brotherhoods, just tradition and culture. It will become the world's religion, and India will be the best place for it. We are all Buddhists. I'm going to give this religion a new lease of life. So Ambedkar's approach was agitate, educate, and organize. So he actually agitated a lot of people, you know, with all his statements, which sounds sometimes very challenging. And then after that, you have to educate the people, then organize. That's how he was able to gather about 300,000 people to convert. And then his approach was non-violence. Another thing we need to mention is that he said his approach is not Theravada or Mahayana or Vajrayana. It is Navayana. It is a neo-Buddhist, new Buddhism. That is the way he coined the word for his own advocacy. Okay. Okay. I don't know whether you want to take a rest, or I think we'll take a rest now.
Yeah.
And,
Sean?
are we back?
Yes, we are. I am.
Okay. Okay. We will continue. Okay. Just now we were talking about Dr. Ambedkar's approach to bring people back to Buddhism. So his approach was, as he mentioned, three things: agitate, educate, organize. You want to do any social change, first you got to make people think. You got to agitate people's mind, and then you got to educate, and then you got to get things organized. That was his approach. That's how he managed to get mass conversion of about 300,000 people. And his approach was a non-violent approach. And like he said, it is not Theravada, Mahayana, or Vajrayana. It is Navayana. The screen is not big. Okay. So now we got that mass conversion and subsequently a few other conversions, mass conversions. We would like to look at the impact of the Ambedkar Buddhism. Since the Buddhism in India that was introduced by Ambedkar was commonly now referred as Ambedkar Buddhism. And in fact, many Buddhist households who follow Ambedkar's path would have a photograph of Ambedkar in the house. Then, if you look at the Buddhist population in India, in 1951, there were only 180,000 Buddhists in India, a tiny number comparing with 600 million people. Then 1961, after Ambedkar's effort, that figure rose to 3.2 million. 1971, 3.8 million. 1981, 4.1 million, and now is approximately 9 million. So the figures continue to rise, and a lot of them, people say, would be around 70 to 80% are Buddhists, were formerly Dalits. Okay, so from here we can see an important outcome of Ambedkar's effort, and an important outcome of Buddhism. Buddhism can help alleviate the immediate social suffering of human beings. So we can use Buddhism to help alleviate this immediate suffering of human beings. Here is a testimony of what engaged Buddhism can do to help humanity in Buddhism. So it's not just self-cultivation, training of the mind, and living things as usual. But before that, today the last part I want to talk about Ambedkar Buddhism in India today. But before that, I would like you to know that Ambedkar was not the first person or the only person who led the Dalits to Buddhism. There were many other people before him and many other people after him. So the people before him, 1898, as early as 1898, compared with Ambedkar's time, 1956, was very much earlier, more than 60 years earlier. We have this Pandit Yoti Tas. He founded the Sakya Buddhist Society and known as the Indian Buddhist Association in Tamil Nadu. This is a place where there is quite a population of Dalits, and he also mass convert a lot of people to Buddhism. And then the Alagarika Dharmapala from Sri Lanka, whom we discussed when we were talking about Sri Lanka, he came over to India. He founded the Mahabodhi Society in India, and he also converted a lot of people into Buddhism much earlier than Ambedkar. It was stated about 50 years earlier than Ambedkar. Okay? But because he converted a lot more from the upper class, so people tend to ignore the fact that he actually converted quite a lot number of Dalits too. And then you have Swami Achyutanand Hariha in Uttar Pradesh, and Babu Manguram in Punjab. So there were a lot of people before and after him. But people generally now, a lot of people know about Ambedkar and a lot of people follow Ambedkar because he was a well-known figure in India at that time. He was the person in charge of drafting the constitution of India. He and Gandhi used to disagree on a lot of things. And for example, he insisted on use a special electorate for the certain caste, and Gandhi refused. Gandhi said that would perpetuate, by having an electorate for a certain caste, that would perpetuate the caste system. But he said, Ambedkar said, without this, there is no protection for the outcast people. So they had great arguments. So when it comes to the drafting of the Constitution of India, Gandhi said, you do it. So he was one of those drafting the Constitution of India. So because he was also a famous political figure, so today a lot of people follow Ambedkar Buddhism. And today one of the societies, Three Ratana Buddhist communities, because it's in your syllabus, I have to mention a little bit. Three Ratana Buddhist Society carry on with the work of Dr. Ambedkar. And the founder of Three Ratana Buddhist Society, earlier days, the name was called Friends of the Western Buddhist Order. Probably you have heard that. Friends of the Western Buddhist Order, founded by Venerable Sangharashita. Okay? And Sangharashita came to India and helped a lot of the Dalit community. Unfortunately, Sangharashita himself was, when he later days, when he went back to Europe, to UK, he himself was embroidered in a lot of sex scandals, which he finally admitted to. So that tainted the name of the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order. And then in another way, the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order is no longer Western Buddhist Order, where it has branches in India and also in the places like Australia. So they decided to change the name Tiratana Buddhist Community. So Tiratana Buddhist Community, as I have mentioned to you earlier when we were talking about lay Buddhism, is unique in the sense that they really don't have monastics in the later days. Even Sangharashita himself, at one time when he was a monk, later thought he was not a monk. He kept long hairs. And but the society, Tiratana Buddhist Community, continued to to work in India and help a lot of people, especially the Dalits. And this gentleman, Lokamitra, is now the leader of this Tirata Buddhist community in Nagpur, the headquarters, Nagpur, and doing very fine jobs helping people, helping the people. Venerable this Sankara Lokamitra himself was also a monk, but later he became a layman and he married a local Dalit, I suppose. Anyways, a local Indian, whom I met also, and he was doing very fine jobs. He was invited to Malaysia when I was the vice president of the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia in the 1990s. So he came around and he gave talks in Malaysia to create some awareness about the Dalits in India, and we try to help in our ways the people of the Dalits in India. In 2016, at the 60th anniversary of the Ambedkar's conversion, October, he invited me to go over to Nagpur, where we attended the conference there. And this was where we took the photograph. So 4 years ago, I was still very much younger than what I am now today, right? When I was there, Dr. Mitra related a story which I did not know until when I was there. He said, by us inviting him to Malaysia, he got a lot of exposure. And by our association, because the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia is also a world also affiliated to the World Fellowship of Buddhist Youth. So through this association, he came to know a lot of people from Taiwan. And from Taiwan, he got a lot of donations. This is how good karmic energies spread, you see. So by coming to Malaysia, he got connection with us. And through our connection, he got connection with Taiwan. And from connection with Taiwan, he got money, donations to come over to India to help him to improve the lives of the Dalits. So in fact, we visited a number of centers. For example, a center to house, to provide hostels for Dalit girls coming to the city for education. That hostels accommodated about 400 people. And we also visited a number of schools and kindergartens, some of them funded by the Taiwanese. So they were doing very fine jobs helping the people there. So this is the role of the Hiratana Buddhist community helping the Dalits in India today. So if you look at the situation today, maybe you would like to know that there are still about 200 million. Today's India's population is approximately 1,200 million. Okay? So you have about 200 million Dalits still in India. And if you look at some of these things here, perhaps the position of the Dalits seems to have improved. For example, the 10th president of India, Narayanan, he is a Dalit. And then the richest man that runs a steel mill in Ukraine, spanning over 8 countries, he was the first Dalit billionaire. Okay? Then Damodaran Sanjeevaya, second chief minister of Andhra Pradesh. Ram Sudapas, former chief minister of Bihar. Bihar is a state where Burgaya is located, one of the poorest states in India. So if you look at this, it seems things are improving for them. But actually, the discrimination against the lower caste still continue today, even in the Indian diaspora, even in USA. If you read the news, there were Indian people in the Silicon Valley of the lower caste being discriminated by Indian higher caste in Silicon Valley itself, and the matter was brought to court and things like that. So not really, discrimination continues. Some of these things I need to. So now if you look at the current issues, when we look at Ambedkar's story and conversions, there are certain issues that we need to on earth, how can we resolve issues perpetuated by religion? You know, some of these issues, for example, caste system, is perpetuated, it's not invented by religion, but perpetuated and promoted by religion. Many people believe the caste system was a historical and cultural development, but religion perpetuated this, promoted this. So how can we resolve this problem? If, let's say, we find religions perpetuating injustice and suffering, and all making use of religions, how can we resolve these kind of issues? How can we, as a follower of the Buddha, how can we help to elevate, to address this injustice perpetuated by religion? So this is an issue that we need to consider. And number two, I would like to bring up the issue of challenges faced by engaged Buddhism. When we say engaged Buddhism, we always talk about non-violence, radical, and mass participation. And these three characteristics tend to be mentioned by scholars that engaged Buddhists always try to make changes to the society through non-violence means, but those changes are very radical and try to involve a lot of people, mass participation. But this engaged Buddhism, this approach, does it really work? Or does it really work well? Because today we realize that more and more Dalits are going for nationalism and extremism. There are today actually some terrorist groups in India also. Meaning to say, our approach of non-violence and mass participation might not be palatable to some people. Some people will still find it more useful for them to use extremist means, including violent means. So this is a challenge for us. And of course, in handling this caste issue, we have a cultural issues. This cultural issue of self-marginalization. You know, changing the label is easy, you know. When you are a Dalit, people call you a Dalit, or you yourself call yourself a Dalit. And after changing label, you call yourself a Christian, a Buddhist. Does it mean that you already changed inside? There is a joke that there was a Dalit who challenged being rediscriminated. So he went to court against a Brahmin. He claimed that he was discriminated by the Brahmins. But when in the court, the Brahmins challenged the Dalit. Do you dare to come and touch me? Come and touch me. Do you dare to come and touch me? The Dalits dare not touch him. The Dalit himself still could not get out of that prison of being a Dalit. He dare not touch the Brahmins. Even though he wants to claim equality, he dare not touch the Brahmins. So this brings to mind a story that I want to relate to you. That there was a man, he had a problem. He always imagined that he's a rat, a mouse. So whenever he sees a cat, he will feel frightened. He thinks that the cat is going after him. Although he's a man, but in his mind he imagines that he's a cat, or in his mind he imagined that he's a mouse or a rat. So he went for psychological treatment. So after several months of treatment, finally he's convinced that I'm no more. I'm a human being. I'm not a cat actually. I'm sorry. I'm not a mouse. I'm not a rat. I'm a human being. And he could confirm with the doctors that I'm very confident. I'm a human being. And the doctor also said, you are a human being. So he was very happy that I'm not a human being. So as he walked out of the hospital, he saw a cat, and he retreated. Then the doctor said, why? You are human beings. And he said, I know I'm a human being, but I'm afraid that The cat doesn't know that I'm a human being. So, you see, after 3,000 years of brainwashing, sometimes it's very difficult to get out of that kind of cultural issues. That is the problem. Okay? So this is the problem. Despite conversion, does not mean that you would just straight away work. Okay? And today, class discrimination is still very widespread. You know, 30% of the Christians are Dalits. Today in India, 70% of the Christians are Dalits. But out of 160 bishops, only 2 or 3 bishops are from the Dalits. So even within Christianity, you can find that kind of discrimination, despite the fact that they were converted into Christianity. Now, for that matter, in my country also, half the Christians are from the natives, but the bishops, archbishops, they were all either of Indians. I have yet to find 1 or 2 from the local natives. Okay, I think I have done almost all about India. Okay, I will stop this one and share the next one. From India, we move to the neighbor. We will move to the neighbor Myanmar. So meanwhile, while I'm looking for Myanmar's slide, if you have any question, get ready to ask. Get ready to post a question. We can discuss together. Okay, you know that I'm going to switch Myanmar now. Okay, so just now we were talking about India, where unlike the case of Sri Lanka, where the socially engaged Buddhism was very much to do with anti-colonialism and political issues in Sri Lanka. Here, we have a case of Myanmar, where the socially engaged Buddhism had a lot to do with anti-colonialism, subsequently anti-government of the day, and then subsequently conflict with the Rohingyas in Myanmar. So India and Sri Lanka had one similarity, that they attracted some Westerners very much earlier than in China. When we have Venerable U Dhamaloka of 1856, a celebrated preacher. He came over, editor in Burma and Singapore, and he always traveled between Burma and Singapore until his conviction of sedition in 1910. So he was one of those whom the British doesn't like very much, but he himself was a British, rather an Irish. Okay, in 1900 and 1911, the Irish Buddhist U Dhamaloka publicly challenged Christianity and imperial power, leading to 2 trials for seditions. And then you have another very well-known figure in the history of Myanmar, Venerable Uttama. Okay. Now, Venerable Uttama, sometimes we call it Sayadaw U Uttama, born 1879, died 1997. Now, he studied in Calcutta. And then he traveled around to India and to France and to Egypt. So we notice that he was rather well exposed to the West. And he even taught Pali and Sanskrit in the Academy of Buddhist Science in Tokyo. So a learned scholar. And then he traveled to Korea, Manchuria, Port Arthur. This Port Arthur is not in Australia or any Western country, it's in China. At that time it was called Port Arthur. Today it's called Risun Ko. And then Annam, which means Vietnam, then Cambodia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and India. So he was a very widely traveled man, well exposed to many ideas. So anti-colonialism had a lot to do with the middle class that emerged during that time, who were well exposed to the ideas of the West and who wanted to rule their own countries, to bring back the self-rule to their own country. So after his traveling, Gautama returned to British Burma and started his political activities. He toured the country lecturing for YMCA and giving anti-colonial speeches. And because of that, he was arrested for his infamous Craddock Get Up speech against the Craddock scheme by Sir Regime Craddock, the then governor of British Burma. This Craddock scheme was a political reformation scheme, a sort of, today we call it like a political constitution. But in this case, it was actually to strengthen the grips of the British over Burma. So he asked the governor then, Craddock, to get up, but he was arrested. So he was repeatedly imprisoned on charges of sedition. He carried on. Gautama was one of the first monks to enter political arena and the first person in British Burma to be imprisoned as a result of making a political speech, followed by a long line of nationalists such as Aung San and U Nu. Aung San is the father of Aung San Suu Kyi, okay, the present leader in Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi. Her father, Aung San, was a general who led Myanmar to independence, but Aung San was murdered, massacred by his own army people. And then U Nu was the first president, president of the Myanmar. Then, according to academics, between 1921 and 1937, Gautama actually spent more time in prison than outside. So he was in and out of prison. So Gautama is seen as both the first true mud of Burmese nationalism and father of the modern Arakanese nationalist movement. You will notice later, I will show you the map, that Arakan or Rakhine state or Arakan state is on the western side of Myanmar, bordering Bangladesh. So he came from there. So today he's acknowledged as a leader of the Burmese nationalism. The Sri Jadi Kong is a temple, continued to be an important focal point in the Burmese political movement. The 2007 uprising was said to have started here also. Now, Gautama came from this temple, Sri Jadi Kong, and in 2007, when the students were demonstrating against the military government in 2008, but I mean, the peak at 2008, but it seems the beginning was in 2007 when the students surrounded a police station in 2007, trying to, students and monks from the Sri Jadi Kong surrounded a police station in 2007, asking for the release of the dissident or something like that. Okay. Now you have another person who is well known in Myanmar today, about the same time as Gautama, now is Visara. Visara died in prison after a 166-day hunger strike against the British rule in Burma. This is Visara, not very clear picture. If you go to Myanmar today, and if you travel from the airport into the city of Rangoon, you pass by a roundabout. In the roundabout, in the middle of the roundabout, you'll be able to see a tall structure, and on top of this structure, there's one monk, and that monk is Venerable U Visara. So he's remembered this way, and I think there's a road also called Visara Road, named after him. So the Burmese respected him a lot for his sacrifices in fighting for independence of Myanmar. When he was 12 years old, he became a Buddhist monk. When he was 16 years old, he returned to lay life. And at 18, he married a local girl, have a girl. The marriage broke down, he married, had another girl. Okay, at 23, he became a novice monk again, and then decided to stay on as a full-fledged monk. Here is another example like Gautama. He studied Sanskrit in India for 2 years. Now, in those days, India, being ruled by the British for a long time, a lot of people in Southeast Asia, Myanmar and Malaya included, would like to go to India for further education. So he studied Sanskrit in India for 2 years, and he also met Gautama. So first prison stay, 1926. He was sentenced to prison for 1 year and 9 months for making an illegal speech. Okay, and at the prison, the authorities ordered him to take off the Buddhist monk's robe and wear the inmate uniform. He refused. Because Indian prison guards would not disrobe him, the British officers themselves forcefully disrobed him. The monk went on a hunger strike, refusing to take any food or drink until he was allowed to wear the robe. Prison officials repeatedly tortured him, but he did not give in. 40 days into the hunger strike, prison officers finally relented and allowed him to wear the robe. They transferred him to a prison in Midnapore, West Bengal. He was released from prison on 29th of February 1929. Then again, this time second prison stay. His independence was short-lived. He promptly rejoined the political scene and was duly arrested again for making an anti-colonist speech at a village. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison for inciting sedition. Then again, the same thing he started. In a replay of the first prison stay, Visara was forcefully disrobed and the monk again went on a hunger strike on 6 April 1929. This time, in the test of wills, prison officers did not relent even as the news of the strike attracted increasing attention as the strike went on. Over 4 months into the strike, on 17 August 1929, a few senior monks were allowed to see him in the prison. Then Visara repeated his conditions that he would take milk if he was allowed to wear the robe, and food if he was allowed to fast on Sabbath day. And that he was prepared to die for the cause. The British authorities were unmoved, however. So, after 166 days, the monk died on 19th of September 1929. The prison officers secretly dropped off the monk's body at 3 a.m. the next day at a monastery in Kim Yin Nai. So that was Visara. Of course, the news of his death shocked the country. There was an outpouring of public support for what he stood for. He was given a cremation and burial in the public square west of the Sri Dagon Pagoda. So this previously unknown monk's ultimate sacrifice profoundly moved many Burmese who were not concerned themselves with the politics before and galvanized the nascent independence movement. So he became a hero of the independence movement. So in a way, we can see that some of these monks were actually the early champions for independence. And if you look at it from the social perspective, monks were actually better educated than many lay people, and they took up the leadership to bring their country out of the grips of the colonial power. Now we come back, that was history already, all history now. Now we come back to the most recent one, the Saffron Revolution. This is called the 888 uprising. 888 rising is 1988. Okay, 1988 August the 8th. Okay, 1988 August the 8th uprising led by students, and some participated. This was uprising against the military government. Thousands of people were killed, and some students fled to Thai border. In fact, I recently met former student leaders who fled to the Thai border. She was a doctor. She actually graduated already, but was still involved with the student movement. She said she fled to the Thai border for security reasons, for fear that he would be captured by the army and would be tortured, and some of them would be killed. So she fled to the Thai border, thinking that she would be able to return soon. But from that on until today, she was still at the Thai border. She couldn't go back to it. And she now helped a lot of people who ran away from other parts of Myanmar into Thailand. Okay. So during the 888 uprising, if you notice at the photograph, there were quite a lot of monks participating. So the reporters like to take this kind of photograph and show all over the world. So you might get into a wrong impression that a lot of monks were involved, but actually, you know, in Myanmar there are at least 300,000 monks, reportedly said to be 300,000 monks. So the number of monks participating actually is still very small, and the majority of the monks, especially the well-known monks, were not involved. Then it was at this time that Aung San Suu Kyi came back to her country. Okay. Then Aung San Suu Kyi, the daughter of Aung San, who was married to a British, a Sanskrit scholar, and they had two children, two sons, and so after Aung San Suu Kyi was given the Nobel Prize, a lot of people had high hope for her that she would be able to resolve the conflicts and problems in Myanmar. But until today, the problems were still not fully resolved. And Sulak Siparaksa, founder of the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, at one time supported her because she was against the military government. But after she came into power now, she was already the de facto leader for the last 5 years, and only the last few weeks was re-elected for a second term. Sulak claimed that she did not resolve the conflict in Myanmar, especially the conflict caused by the Rohingya. So Sulak actually condemned her. So even within the so-called socially engaged Buddhists, we sometimes have problems in arriving at a consensus, arriving at a similar opinion. Aung San Suu Kyi, once in power, would have to be more prudent in her approach. She could not be just speaking up as she liked. She had to work quietly for solutions, which some socially engaged Buddhists not be able to comprehend. So during this later, I mean the recent development, there was we call it the All Burma Monks Alliance, headed by this U Gambira. Okay. So following the protest, he went into hiding and published 2 editorials critical of the Burmese government in the Washington Post and the Guardian on 4th October also. He was arrested the same day. So I give you all this story to let you see the pattern that earlier they were against the British rules. Now they were against the military government's rules. In 2008, he was sentenced to 68 years in prison, 12 years in hard labor. The sentence was reduced to 65 years on appeal. Gambira reportedly protested his imprisonment by organizing chanting with other imprisoned monks, boycotting his trial, and going on hunger strike. Human rights groups, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, also protested his imprisonment. Anyway, he was released during the mass pardon in 2012, and then he ceased to be a monk in 2012, stating that he had been unable to find a monastery to join due to his status as a former prisoner. He was rearrested at least 3 times in 2012. So I just want to repeat here that even though there were a number of engaged monks, the vast majority of monks are just meditating monks, meditation monks or ceremonial monks. But the one that capture headlines, of course, are those engaged monks. So now I want to bring you to another issue that socially engaged monks are said to be involved. But I think perhaps we take a breakdown so that we can start this new subchapter. Okay, shall we take a break now?
Sure, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so we were talking about socially engaged Buddhism in Myanmar and involving monks in the anti-colonial movement. Now we are looking at the social engagement of more recent events, particularly in reference to the Rohingya issues, because I think people in the West are much exposed to the current issues in Myanmar today. So you first look at the map of Myanmar. This is the new capital, Naypyidaw. The old capital is at the bottom. Oh, sorry. The old capital. This part, this western part of Myanmar, this part is bordering Bangladesh. This particular part. The vast part is bordering India. Another part, China, Laos, Thailand. But this particular part is bordered with Bangladesh. And this place called Coast Bazar is belong to Bangladesh. Okay. This part we call it Rakhine State. Rakhine State. Previously called Arakan. Same. Arakan means Arakan. Okay. So now we have a problem of often labeled as a Muslim-Buddhist conflict in this region. So let us go through this in more detail now. Now, if you look at this Rakhine or Arakan state, actually, this area is still majority people are the local Rakhine people. We call it the Rakhine people, especially this part, this white part. Majority are still the local Rakhine people. And then this light purple area, they are mixed. It means to say there are some Rohingya people. The Rohingya peoples are actually Bangladeshi of the Muslim faith living around this area. Later on, we will understand why they call themselves Rohingya, whereas the Myanmar government called them Bangladeshi, call them Bangladeshi or Punjabi. Whereas here in this particular part, even though the Rohingyas are minority in the Rakhine state, but actually they are majority in this particular northern part. Okay, so they become they are majority in this particular northern part, and also they occupy part of Bangladesh in the Coast Pasar area. So now we have to look at the history. What the problem? What is the big problem behind here? After Burma gained independence, a concentration of nearly 90% of the area's population, the distinguishing characteristics of their own culture and the Islamic faith, form an ethnic and religious minority group in the western fringe of the republic. For successive generations, their identity and Islam have been practically not distinguishable. The ethnicity of this group of people is always Islam, so they are together. And the population is in this Rakhine state, mostly in this Rakhine state. The population distribution I already mentioned to you earlier. Okay, so at the beginning, they adopted a policy in favor of joining East Pakistan with the slogan Pakistan Jindabad, victory to Pakistan. This policy faded away when they could not gain support from the government of Pakistan. Later, they began to call for the establishment of an autonomous region. So this ethnic group of people at first wanted to join. They wanted to join East Pakistan, later called Bangladesh. They wanted to join. But this policy faded away when they could not gain support from the East Pakistan. Even East Pakistan don't want to accept them. So they began to call for the establishment of an autonomous region. They wanted the Rakhine state to be autonomous, not part of Myanmar either. The Pakistan's attitude towards the Muslim in the Arakan was different from its policy towards the Kashmir. Kashmir is the northern part of India. India say it is part of India. Pakistan say it is part of Pakistan. So they fought wars over that area before. Now, but in the case of the Rakhine state, the Rohingya people, during the independence, the war in Bangladesh, and during the independence war in Bangladesh, most of the Muslims in Arakan supported West Pakistan. And so, after independence, East Pakistan disowned them. So, this is Pakistan. Pakistan was separated as West and East. When modern India was formed, Pakistan was also formed, but divided into East and West. So later, East Pakistan was not happy with West Pakistan, especially after a great natural disaster, typhoon, and things like that, and they did not get enough support from West Pakistan. So they fought an independence war. They don't want to join here. But when they fought the independent war, the Rohingya people living in this Rakhine state, they supported West Pakistan. They supported West Pakistan. So when eventually East Pakistan gained its independence, so East Pakistan disowned them. So even until today, East Pakistan don't like to accept these people. Okay? So consequently, this group of people had to insist firmly on their identity as Rohingyas. That means Rohingya or Roshanga, meaning the inhabitants of Rakhine. So they claim themselves to be the inhabitants of Rakhine. So that's how the term Rohingyas comes about. But actually, ethnically, they are the same as the people of Bangladesh. So they began to complain that the term Chittagonian Bengali had arbitrarily been applied to them. But to the majority of the group, being illiterate agriculturists in the rural area, still prefer their own identity as Bangalore Muslim. So the leaders call themselves the Rohingyas, but the ordinary people still consider themselves Bengali Muslim, okay, from the state of Bengal. Another problem, during the Japanese invasion, the Rohingya sided with the British, while the Burmese or the Burman sided with the Japanese. So the Rohingyas were on the side of the British, the Burmans were on the side of the Japanese. So they became enemy actually. So after the Japanese invasion, the Rohingya Mujahideen fought the government. Rohingya fought a Mujahideen, a Muslim terrorist group, fought government forces in attempt to get cessation so that it would join Pakistan. But Pakistan did not support it. So it lost momentum, and by the end of 1950, mostly surrendered to the government forces by 1961. So that was about their first attempt to form a new territorial government of its own. Then in the 1970s, Rohingya separatist movement emerged from the remnants of the Mujahideen, and the fighting culminated with the Burmese government launching a massive military operation named Operation Dragon King 1978 to expel them. So because they formed a military group fighting the Burmese government, so the Burmese government fought them in 1970. Then came 1970, they formed the Rohingya Solidarity Organization and attacked Burmese authorities near the Bangladesh-Myanmar border. The Burmese government responded militarily. So again in 1990, the Rohingya Solidarity Organization attacked the Burmese authorities along the border. So the Burmese government again counter-attack. Then comes the most recent one, 2016, October 2016. Burmese border posts along the Bangladesh-Myanmar border were attacked by a new insurgent group, the Haraka al-Yaqin, resulting in the death of at least 40 combatants. It was the first major resurgence of the conflict since 2001. Violence erupted again in November 2016, bringing the 2016 death toll to 134. And again on 25th August 2017, when the Arkhan Rohingya Salvation Army launched coordinated attacks on 24 police posts and an army base that left 71 dead. Then, of course, the British, the Burmese government would not do nothing, so they counter-attacked, and this was when the Burmese government was alleged to have committed genocide. Okay? But actually, atrocities seem to be inflicted on both sides. While the Rohingyas claim to be persecuted by the Burmese government in the Arakan state, if you look at the Bangladeshi side, where the Rakhine people, these are the Rakhine people, mean the people who are not Rohingyas, the Burmese people, the Burmese of the Rakhine state. So in the Patukali district and the Bakuna district of the Bangladesh, in Bangladesh, the Rakhine population declined from a high of 100,000 in the 20th century to merely 2,500 in 2015. So most of the Rakhine people in Bangladesh had escaped over to escape from the persecution in Bangladesh. They had run over to Myanmar. Okay? There used to be 19 Buddhist temples, which was declined to just one by 21. So this is the situation in Bangladesh. And the Rakhine cemetery in Tapkali Upazila, Baguna, 150 years old, was forcefully taken by local land peoples. So this is how the atrocities were actually also committed on the Rakhine. The Rakhine population in the district decreased by 95% and lands owned by the Rakhine decreased by 80%. Rakhine land is also being taken over by politicians. Okay. Ironically, the Rakhine state has been condemned internationally for persecution of the Rohingya. So this is the irony that while the international community condemned the Rakhine state for persecuting the Rohingya, everything seems very silent when the Rakhine people were prosecuted on the Bangladeshi side. And the 2012 violence actually started with a gang rape and murder of a Rakhine Buddhist by 3 Rohingya youths. And because of that, 88 casualties. And we look at the casualties, 57 Muslims, 31 Buddhists. 2,500 houses were burned. Of these, 1,003 belong to Rohingyas, 1,001 belong to Rakhines. So both sides suffer. Okay. So if you look at this, why I spend some time to explain to you this is because this is a lot to do with the ethnic and political problem, not so much to do with Buddhism or Islam. Although they have shown the collective political interest of more than 5 decades, they mean the Rohingyas, they have shown the collective political interest for more than 5 decades since Burma gained independence. Their political and cultural rights have not so far been recognized and guaranteed. On the contrary, the demand for the recognition of their rights sounds a direct challenge to the rights and survival of the Arakis majority in their homeland. So they wanted to claim their own political and cultural rights. This has not been recognized after 5 decades. And on the contrary, their claim for recognition of this political and cultural rights is now seen as a kind of a challenge to the Arakan majority, the Rakhine majority in the Rakhine state itself. It's like a minority challenging majority. We can see that a symbiotic coexistence has so far been inconceivable because of the political climate of mistrust and fear between the two races. Okay, the mistrust and fear is continuing, and the Muslims from the other parts of the Arakan kept themselves aloof from the Rohingya cause as well. The East Pakistan side or the Bangladeshi side also were not very supportive of the Rohingyas. Okay. Thus, the cause of the Rohingya finds a little support outside their own community, and their claims of an early historical tie to Burma looks like would be successful in the very near future. And how was the Buddhists involved? Now, during this period, you have a movement called 969 movement. The 9 refers to the virtues of the Buddha, the 9 virtues. And then the 6 refers to the 6 virtues of Dhamma, Swakato, Bhagavata Dhammo, Sanditiko, Akaliko, Ehipasiko, and so on. Okay? And the Sangha, last 9 refers to the virtues of the Sangha, okay? Supatipano, Bhagavato, Savaka, Sangho, Uchupatipano, Bhagavato, Savaka, Sangho, and so on. Well, the Burmese like to use numbers because they like numbers. Okay, there is some power in numbers, so they use this number to symbolize Buddhism. 969 movement. Okay. A nationalist movement opposed to what they see as Islam's expansion in predominantly Buddhist Burma. So they see this as a threat from Islam to the predominantly Buddhist Burma. So that's why I sent you an article from the Diplomat about Muslim-Islam relationship in Southeast Asia. If you read through that article, then you will be better understand the historical ties between the two religions, and that had led to the present situation of certain degree of mistrust. Okay. So the leader, this is one of the leader of the 969, Venerable Wiratu. The Time magazine published an article and put there the face of Buddhist terror, and this has of course the news media like to sensationalize, so they use the name the face of Buddhist terror, but I do not see in what way that he can be considered as a terrorist. He was not a ruler who inflicted suffering on other people. He was not a military ruler who conquered other people's area. He was just a Buddhist monk, and he has his own views. Although his views, you may not agree with him, but to say that he's a terrorist, I think is we are unnecessary upgrade his status to be a terrorist. Well, we have to call for restrictions on the marriages between Buddhists and Muslims. So this is definitely from a fear of the increasing Muslim population, because Muslims generally do not practice birth control. So they, to quote and unquote, they multiply very fast. And this demographic change is also one of the reasons for feeling of insecurity in Sri Lanka also. So this is the same thing now for some people in Myanmar. And a Muslim man, if he married a non-Muslim woman, that non-Muslim woman must be converted to be a Muslim. And a Muslim woman, if he married a man of say Buddhism, that man also must be converted to Buddhism. So in either way, conversion must be always to Muslim, not to Buddhist, to other religion. So in a way, inter-religions marriage means more people become Muslims, because it's like a sort of a practice or requirement that whoever marry a Muslim, whether male or female, must convert to Islam. Well, we have to propose to the government that we should make a law to stop this. That whoever married to Buddhist must be converted to Buddhist. And he gave an example. In Malaysia, whoever married to a Muslim must become a Muslim, regardless of whether male or female. Same thing in Singapore. Whoever married to a Muslim must become a Muslim, whether male or female. So we Buddhists, as the Buddhist country, Burma is a Buddhist country, we should follow what Malaysia is doing. Whoever married to Buddhist must be Buddhist. Now, of course, you make such proposals. Some people would not like this kind of proposal. So they call him a terror. And of course, some of his remarks were very crude. This man sometimes can speak very vulgarly. He said, you can be full of kindness and love, but you cannot sleep next to a bad dog. So, and he also said, if you are weak, our land will become Muslim. So this is obviously out of a concern. Okay. The Burmese president Thein Sein at that time defended Wiratu, saying that the monks' order was striving for peace and prosperity, and that the report undermined efforts to build trust between faiths, referring to the Times of Magazine's report. The government is currently striving with religious leaders, political parties, media, and the people to rid Myanmar of unwanted conflict. Well, even in Malaysia, we try to not be entangled with this kind of issues because we are living in a Muslim majority country, and if we are not careful with our words, this will cause more problems to everybody. But nevertheless, sometimes we are also asked to comment, and I was asked to comment, and my comment actually appeared in the Bahasa Malaysia. Well, I try to say that, like what I said, Wiratu may be very radical. We might not agree with his views, but to consider him as a terrorist, I think this is upgrading him unnecessarily. Okay, Now we look at the concern of Viratu. In 2014, Ghana Sara and Bodu Bala Sena of Sri Lanka signed a pact with Ashin Viratu and the 969 movement to build a Buddhist alliance in order to protect the Buddha Sasana. They also invited all peace-loving people from other religions, including Muslims and Christians. So it appears that there is some kind of a tension arising from the demographic changes. Okay, some of the stuff I may have to skip so that we will have some time for discussion with you too. This is a well-known monk in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar today, Sitagu Sayadaw, very well known for his socially engaged work, known for his charismatic leadership and practices of socially engaged Buddhism. This organization has funded many social projects in Myanmar, including water pumps, construction of hospitals, such as the Sitagu Ayudhana Hospital and the Sitagu Buddhist Academy. He has been lauded for his missionary and charity works, especially in the aftermath of the cyclone Najis in 2008, which killed about 100,000 in the country's Delta regions. And he is also involved in inter-religious dialogue and sits on the board of World Religious Leaders and the Elijah Interfaith Institute. This Elijah Interfaith Institute is founded in Israel. So now we generally have a discussion that the Rohingya issue is not an issue related to religion. It is an ethnic issue mixed up with religion to gain international support. Why we say it is not a issue with religion? Because you can see that Muslims in other parts of Myanmar coexist with other religions and ethnic groups without much problem. So if you go to Rangoon or you go to any other parts of Myanmar, you can find a lot of Muslims and they are staying very close to the Buddhists. If you go to the center square in Rangoon today, you can find one huge pagoda with 8 sides, but 4 sides. When you open the doors from the 4 sides, immediately you see mosques or churches. So they coexisted without much problem. So these Rohingyas also do not get much support from Muslims from the other ethnic groups. But this has been turned into a religious issue or portrayed as a religious issue. I think for one main reason is because when it is a religious issue or it is the issue of Islam being prosecuted, then you can get support from the Islamic world. So people tend to portray this as a religious issue so that countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, which are Muslim neighbors, would lend a helping hand. And in fact, some of the Rohingyas fled, quite a lot of Rohingyas fled to Malaysia and Indonesia, and some to the Middle East. So, if we look at this problem also, it is historical factors. You know, they were supporting the British fighting against the Burmans. So they were historical factors that give rise to present day tensions and conflicts, and also demographic changes. The Muslim populations keep on increasing to the extent that the other ethnic groups or the other religions felt threatened. Okay. Another problem is the exert identity and feeling threatened. Muslims, unlike many other religions, they would like to exert their identity. They would like to have their own ways. A lot of people in the West see Islam as a religion, Buddhism as a religion, Hinduism as a religion. But actually, Islam is not only a religion. It is a political religious system. Meaning to say, they would like to have their own ways. So even in France, when there's a small Muslim community, they would like to have their own Sharia laws. So when they try to have their own laws or their own ways or their own way of operating business, or for example, selling halal food, then they are actually exerting their identity, and this would be taken as a threat to the other non-Muslim groups. So this is a problem. Just to mention, okay, in Sri Lanka, for instance, the Muslim groups have grown have grown in numbers, and they have come to a stage where they ask to have a certified halal food, halal certification on food, or halal certification on products and food, so that only Muslims consume those halal certification, such halal certified food or product. But for the Buddhist shops in Sri Lanka, to get that certification, you have to pay a sum of money to the Muslim clergy. So the Buddhists felt that for hundreds or thousands of years we have been operating our business that way, and the Muslims have been frequenting our shop that way. Why now suddenly we have to pay money to you to get this so-called certification? So this is the case of exerting identity, and some other parties felt threatened. Okay? So in fact, this was become a big issue in Sri Lanka. Now we make a big comparison between engaged Buddhism of Sri Lanka and Myanmar. There is a similar sense of cease or sense of responsibility to protect Buddhism. Both in Sri Lanka and Myanmar, two Buddhist majority countries, there are some monks who feel that they are being threatened, mainly because of this exertion of identity by the Muslim groups and demographic changes. For example, in Sri Lanka, one of the demands made by the Buddhist engaged Buddhist monks is that the government must not allow more Middle East money to come in to buy up churches for conversion to mosque. Because as you build more mosques and then you ask for your Islamic halal certification and things like that, then the majority in Sri Lanka who were not used to this kind of things felt a sense of threatened. So there's a sense of cease. And this similar thing is happening in certain part of Myanmar, not all parts of Myanmar, because in Myanmar, the concentration of Muslims is mainly in that northern part of Rakhine State, really. Not even the whole Rakhine State, but northern part of Rakhine State. And because of that, they felt there is a sense of to protect Buddhism. Okay? But if you look at the cases here, that in Sri Lanka, monks try to champion their cause through direct pursuit of political powers by becoming members of parliament. But in Myanmar, this is not the case. Thus far in Myanmar, despite the fact that they had 300,000 monks, we do not find monks trying to become MPs or trying to pursue certain political powers. They were mostly opinion leaders. But interestingly, we must note that actually engaged Buddhists remain minority, whether in Sri Lanka or in Myanmar, especially in Myanmar. They still remain minority, but their impacts are quite great. That's why we cannot miss them, because while the majority can be meditating away, but that meditation would impact on public life so much. But the engaged Buddhists, by championing certain causes, then that would affect the lives of many other people. So the impact is great. Okay. The vast majority of the lay people and the monastics are still preferring the reclusive or meditative type of Buddhism. Okay, I have covered Myanmar. We have only a few minutes left. Perhaps we open up for a discussion before we end. Okay, it's discussion time. Do you have any issues or ideas that you want to put forth? Anything you would like to share for this morning's talk on India and Myanmar?
What sort of solution do you think is there for the Rohingya issue?
I think up to this stage, nobody has found any solution. So that's why, to me, the solution has to be worked out and not spoken out. What I mean is, we don't have to take sides. Many people pressured Aung San Suu Kyi to take side to condemn the military government for prosecuting the Rohingyas. But if Aung San Suu Kyi were to take sides like this, she would not be in any position to solve the problem. Because this is not an issue where you, by taking sides, then the problem will be resolved. This is an issue where both sides must first build trust. The trust must first come first. There's so much mistrust and so much fear on both sides. Okay? The Rohingyas felt that they were not given enough recognition, no political power, suppressed, prosecuted in many ways. Whereas the Buddhists felt that the Rohingyas are multiplying in numbers, it's so huge, and they are using violent means to challenge our government, burn our police stations, rape our women, especially when they, in Rohingya majority areas. So we are threatened. So unless this kind of in Buddhism we talk about conditions origination, the conditions, unless the conditions are what they call work out in such a way that both sides can build up trust, I do not think there is any solution inside, at least at this moment.
Do you think Bangladesh has something to bring to the table? Should they be involved in this, or should they just go with whatever the Rohingya and Myanmar work out?
Sorry,
Muslims. I'm sorry?
I'm here.
Darn.
I think it's better now.
Okay. What about the position of Bangladesh in these sorts of working out of the issues between Myanmar and the Rohingya and the Muslims?
So, if Bangladesh was willing to take all the Rohingya, I think then the problem would be resolved easily. The problem is Bangladesh would not happen because the same region, the same ethnic groups, then I think the bulk of the problem is resolved. Unfortunately, these Rohingya groups, when they were fighting for their autonomy, at first they wanted to join Bangladesh, but Bangladesh was not interested in them. And later, when Bangladesh was fighting West Pakistan for independence, the Rohingya joined the wrong side. They supported West Pakistan. So until today, the Bangladesh government also do not want to accept them. So in fact, the boat people, they came out to Malaysia and Indonesia and Thailand. Sometimes we find that actually some of these people actually came from Bangladesh, not even from Myanmar.
It's an interesting situation, and over time, it's just been a little fluidic. And I see that Bangladesh is not particularly inclined to work with the Rohingya. But in the last few years, there have been a lot of Rohingya pouring over into that area that I can't pronounce in Bangladesh. So
Yeah,
I see
Bangladesh,
it's a
Bangladesh
difficult
not helping.
situation.
You are right, because Bangladesh is not interested in taking these people. You know, Bangladesh itself is a poverty-stricken country. It has limited land and it has a huge population, a very densely populated area. Taking these people back, you need to provide them with land because they are agricultural people. So perhaps with its own problem, Bangladesh is not keen to take these people.
They have their own issues,
Yeah, they have their own issues.
including the annual flooding. It's hard for them to absorb more people, I see.
Yeah, in fact, there are so many Bangladeshi workers working in Malaysia, legally or illegally. They have their own people running away from Bangladesh to work elsewhere to get better income.
So I have a question. As far as the 969 movement, how widespread was that? Was that quite a few people that were believing in and supporting that, or was it just a handful of people?
I think it is not a very big group, but basically Viratu, being a senior monk, he himself, it seems his own temple group has got 300 over monks. So that's why he's a leader there. And so it is not a big group. If you look around in Myanmar today, the famous monk Sayadaw, a lot of well-known monks are meditation monks. And these meditation monks have a lot of followers. Their followers are all over the world. Okay, for example, we have Burmese monks who are now who have organized branches in Malaysia, and most of the followers here are just meditation followers. And such monks you can find plenty in Myanmar. And monks who are socially concerned about all these socially issues are actually very few in numbers. So, but as I said, we cannot neglect their impact. Because these socially engaged monks can cause quite a lot of impact, and in fact, they attracted a lot of attention. Okay? And when they try to organize the activities en masse, they tend to get some lay people to support her. So there will be some lay people who come forward to support her. Okay? If not, then we have to call it a day now. Already 12 o'clock in Malaysia, 12 o'clock lunchtime. You can go over and sleep. And wake up tomorrow, you have long hours of lectures. And then my turn will come back later, another 3 hours before we end the total of the lectures. Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tato.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You have a nice day.
Have
Yeah.
a good day.
Thank you.
Don't forget our schedule for tomorrow. is
8:30,
8:30 to 11:30 and 1:30 to 4.
1:30. Okay.
Thanks again, Dato.
Thank you, Dato.
Thanks for the reminder, Corey. Thanks, Tato.
So we'll see that till Sunday morning then?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mine is
6:30.
Sunday morning. And you all have received your assignment too, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I forgot to press the button. So luckily, this reminded me when we are going to get our assignment too. Then I had a look at it. Hey, I have not pressed my press button. I have not pressed my send button. So
And remember, Sunday is 6:30,
Yeah.
yeah,
6:30 a.m.
And then after Sunday, the next time we meet is that the mock exam?
I'd have to look at the schedule. I don't recall off the top of my head.
If that's the mock exam, when are we gonna get the mock exam practice questions?
The
Don't
mock
get-
exam is a practice test. So
before the mock exam, we still have a set.
December 5th is the next meeting after Sunday.
4th. Friday
me?
the 4th.
4th, December 4th.
Oh, is it December 4th? Wait a
4th
minute.
and 5th.
Yeah, you're right.
fifth
But
and
the 5th also, right?
5th is the
Yeah.
exam day.
Final review is on the 4th.
You have a final revision, 6 hours of final revision on your Friday and your Saturday on
Saturday morning.
Oh,
And then the mock
December 4th and 5th. Okay.
yeah.
So that is very important one, the revision. We'll go through the revision together, go through all the slides
oh,
together
that's the 12th. Okay, thank
before we
you.
go for the mock exam. Okay.
But if we go over on the 4th for the mock exam, we won't have enough time to memorize for the mock exam the next
Mock
day.
exam is a practice test. It is not graded. So don't put a whole lot of stress and concern over that. All of the other mock exams have been, here's a review, here's the test. We've never had a whole lot of study time between mock exams and the review. So don't stress about it. It's not going to impact your ability to pass.
Okay.
Well, the
Bye, everybody.
university told me, as long as you have done your assignment well, you should get all the basic marks to pass.
Okay, that's good.
He just told us the secret. It turns out all this time the final exams have never mattered. It's all been a test. He's like,
The
"Oops."
university's objective is to pass you, not to fail you.
Yeah, that's
I got
right. That's what I'm
that.
talking about.
Great to know that.
Yeah. Thank you, Dato. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
And
Yeah.